when she lived in Tuapse during the Russian Revolution in 1917, up until, and the story will continue up until 1925.
Okay. Yeah, so we had moved to Tuapse because of Grandma couldn't live where we lived before, where her parents were killed. And there we went to school, like I said already. And my mother was very, very down with her nerves. She had even suicide. How do you say it? And the water was so close by, and she was a good swimmer. So my father was sometimes scared to let her go. And but they didn't go to any church, because there was the Russian church, and I guess they didn't know. I don't know if there was a Lutheran church in this place. So at Easter time, they went downtown. You had to go these big steps down, and then you were downtown. There were streets and streetcars and everything else. So they went along this downtown. We children, we must have been at home with Uncle Franz, playing. And then they saw a little flag, and it said Russian Baptists. And they heard some singing inside. So my father said, let's go inside, see what it is. So they went inside and said it was started already. So they sat in the back there and listened. And it was Easter, and he talked about the sourdough. That's if you have in your heart all that resentment and all that hatred and all that. And Grandma said it was just as if he was talking to her, and they never had seen him. And she broke down and cried and cried. And then when the service was over, the minister came and talked to them both, and they told them the story. And then he told them that the Lord can take away all this hatred, and he can cleanse our heart if we just trust him. And they accepted the Lord as their Savior, both of them. I don't know if it was exactly the same time, but they started to go there to church, and then they were converted, and we children went along with them. I was 10 years old, and then my mother started to sing in a choir, a Russian choir, and they asked me to sing too, so we two were singing, and then they wanted to baptize them, the Russian Baptist, and my father said, no, we know the Mennonites in Millerova, the Dicks and the Fairs, and they knew about them too. And he said, we know that they do the same. They baptize when you're grown up. And then they said they will wait till they come back to Abramsfeld or to Millerova, and then they want to get baptized in the German Mennonite church. And then this was a winter when we came there, maybe in May, and were there all summer. And then we went to school all winter, and the next summer, all of a sudden, the Civil War broke out. The White Army went against the Red Army. The Red Army were the communists, the White Army were the Cossacks, and the people were with the Tsar. And so I can't say too much about that. I was too young yet, but I know how they fight it so much, one against the other. And then all of a sudden the German came in too. And so my father must have heard that the Red Army is coming into Tuapse, even through all these tunnels. It wasn't so easy to get in. But they were on the other side of the mountains, and they were coming through the tunnels. But this was open for us, the sea. So there were a couple of people who were officers and all kinds of ranks, but belonged to the White Army, like my father was too. This was the White Army, the Tsars. And all these people, there were about 40 altogether with their families. They rented a boat, which was really far too small, and rented a boat, and late at night we packed what we could take along, and we came to that boat and went in the sea. Left everything, all the furniture and everything, and went on the sea. And then we drifted far out the sea and wanted to go to the next, that was Novorossiysk, was the next port, going up north more, close to the Azov Sea. And it usually took 3 hours by boat to go to this, but because we were scared, they would see us from the land, so we went about 3 miles inside of the Black Sea. And then all of a sudden a fire broke out. It was just a flat boat, and we were all on top of the boat, lying like herring. And then a fire broke out by the engine. And then the one with was he said, "Rettet euch," or save yourself. And it was 30 or 40 miles off the shore. So we couldn't know, not that far. 3 miles off the shore, yes. But not everybody could swim. And so then a lady was not too far away, and she had a blanket, and she threw her blanket on a fire, and it went out. So we drifted all day long, and the next night, and the next day, and on a third day, we came to that port, Novorossiysk. Came in them, because I think he didn't have any gas, or I don't know. And we had, Dad had Dr. Weinbach. He was a Jewish doctor who used to work with in Tuapse too, but he had already fled there too. He was a white one too, and somehow they had some connections with him. And then we took a taxi and went there to this doctor, and they had a cabin on the yard, and he had his practice right in his house. And then we could stay there. And we stayed there for 12 days. And Dad was looking for a boat again to go farther, because if we go, then we had to go to the Azov Sea, and the Azov Sea went all the way up north, and there was the Don River, who was coming into that Azov Sea. And where the Don River came in, there was the city of Rostov. And from Rostov, it wasn't too far to go by train to Millerova. This is where we came from. And so after 12 days, these people were with us on a boat. They found a bigger boat. And then we went on that boat and came through a canal between going through the Azov Sea and Black Sea. And there was a city, Kerch, that's the name. There we had to stop. And there were the Reds already. And we came at night, late at night, and then they said, all the children and the wives or women stay on a boat. We just want the men. And they took all the men. They had on a narrow plank. They had all to go. I remember how my dad went too, and we were crying. Maybe they will kill him, or we didn't know. And so they were all gone, and we stayed there. Next morning, around 10 o'clock, they allowed us to land, bring the boat closer in so we could embark too. and we didn't know where our dad was. But then, around noontime, he came, and he said they had, and he put all the papers away that he was a white officer. I don't know what he did with it. I don't know that. I was 10 years old then. And so, but they kept quite a few men in the jails, and then we had to stay here. We couldn't go any farther. So my parents looked for a place again, and there were just old little huts, Russian huts with dirt floor, and it was thresh time. So I guess it must have been July or August. Yeah, I remember now, the threshing. And there was a place where they have been threshing, just with a horse and a stone. And there was the house, dirt floor, and you could have it. But it was so very hot inside, and the fleas were so dead. So the parents put our blankets over the straw, and so we slept outside. It was clear and warm and nice. And the Black Sea was just little ways down. Going down, there was the Black Sea. And then at night, all of a sudden, we hear the bullets going, woo! So they had these men, what they kept there. They put them, there was a plank going out into the Black Sea, far inside, so they took these prisoners up to the end there and shoot them, and then they would fall in the water. It was deep there. And we were shooting. And we were children, and we didn't know what's going on. And then I remember the parents said, we have to go inside. We have to get inside. Maybe it starts to rain. They didn't want, but I remember I guess they heard before the shooting, and so we all went inside. And so it was night after night. And we were there maybe a week, 5 days or a week. And Dad was so scared. Anytime maybe they could come back and call him again. But then the Lord provided another ship for us. And so we went on that big ship. Oh, we were so glad to get away from that place. And so we went on this biggest ship, and then we could go through here. And there are all kinds of nice cities along the Azov Sea, which are nice ports, Tahanrog and all kinds of cities. And we couldn't land. From the shore, they called quarantined. There is some kind of a sickness, I think cholera or something was going, and they wouldn't let any ship land. And we didn't have any water. We were running out of water. My father bought a whole sack full of these were donuts, dried ones, and this was our food. They were dry, like buns, when you have them dried. But we ran out of water, and all of a sudden, I guess there must be the German came in there. It was so. In one place there were whites, in other place red ones, and then there were the Germans. And Grandpa looked up, and there was a big German ship. And then we came closer, and it was written in German, and Grandpa called up in German, "Habt ihr Wasser? Do you have some water for us?" This was a smaller boat. And then they gave us water. And then we had a little blue kettle. They gave down a string, threw down a string, so we put the string around the handle, and we pulled it up and then filled it with water, and we drank here. And the other people drank, and we had some dishes we put water in. And this is how we were so thankful for the German water. Yeah, and so it was after a whole month since we left Tuapse, we landed in Rostov. And then we came out, and then it was okay. And then we took a train and went to Milorova. And from Milorova, we took another taxi with a horse and buggy, I don't know. And we went to Abramsfeld. It was 15 miles away. And my uncle was living in our house. But when we came to Abramsfeld, it was on a Sunday, I remember. And people came out from church and they saw us. They almost got us scared. We were so tanned, just like Negroes. all this whole month out on the sun and the water. You can imagine. But oh, how happy we were that we were home again. So we moved in with our uncle. It was a big house too, and in one end we had two rooms. We could enter them. But then my father went again to Milorova and started to look for a house. And he found a house across the street from the high school. And this is where we moved in before school started. And then it was, then for me it was already junior high, I guess. And so we went there to school, and for 2 years. And then again, or was it maybe just a year? No, I don't remember. But the civil war broke out again. They were still fighting. The whites with the reds, and the reds with the whites. And it was just terrible. So my dad had to flee again because the Reds came here, and it was the bombing went on. The schools were closed, but this high school had a big basement. It wasn't built out like we have them in here. It was just dirt floor and coal, lots of coal, because they had heated it with the furnace. But all the neighbors all around were hiding in this basement. And we too. And my mother was expecting a baby, my sister Anne. She came in November. And so it was hard for her already. It was not so very warm down there, and was crossing the street and here. And my father told us children, if you are on the street and you hear bullets go, usually didn't go, so just fall on the floor. And so many times we would go out and then woo, and then we would just drop to the floor. And one time a big bomb just in our yard, where you go in on our big front yard, we had a gate. And right in the gate, it make a big hole 5 or 6 foot deep. And it tore out some windows. And Grandma was getting already very impatient, or she didn't know what will happen. So she didn't want to go over in the basement again, because you never can tell. So my father put up 2 beds, one in the bottom and another bed on top of this bed, and covered the top bed with feathers sticking, with all kinds of blankets, especially the ones that were filled with feathers. The bullets wouldn't go through it, and these rockets, if there is a bomb come, they wouldn't go through the feathers. So my mother was lying there down, and we had a Russian girl who was working for us, looking after us. And she wasn't scared. She would stay in the house and cook meals, bring us some meals over in the basement, or when it was a little quieter, we would go home and eat. And then when it was again so we would run over to the basement. And this is how it was all before November. And then my sister was born, and then about 6 weeks later, again the Red Army came in, and it looked like they had established. And now they were looking for all the people that were involved with the White Army. So my father had to flee. But he brought us, before he fled, he loaded us on a wagon, and we went to Abramsfeld, to his brother's place, in our own house. That his brother was living there. And at one end there were 2 rooms, and this is where we could live. And we were 6 children. I was the oldest, and my sister 6 or 7 weeks old, little Annie. And Johnny was 4 years old, and so going up the steps. And then we lived. Yes, I was 12 already. And then we stayed there, and my aunt helped a little bit, showed me how to bake bread. And every morning I would bake little, and my mother got so sick again with her leg, she couldn't walk. So she stayed day and night in the bed. She could hardly move. So I would bathe little Annie in front of her bed, and then gave it to her to nurse it. And she didn't have enough milk because she was herself sick. And we didn't know where our grandpa, and my dad disappeared. After he brought us down there, he disappeared. We had no idea where he was. And then we lived there, and after Christmas, I guess, came the Reds, or it was starting again, the Whites and the Reds. And then the Red Army came in again. And then they would come in our houses, make us some food, a whole bunch of people. And then my aunt prepared food for them. And we children, we were so scared on the other's end. And then this man, what was the leader of them, he said to my uncle, "Now we killed many people in here, and right on our yard, he would bring in people, men mostly, okay, and put them on our, we had a big barn, a new barn, put them on that barn and shoot them down. So I had to keep the little ones, they shouldn't look outside. But my sister Elizabeth, she wanted to see it. And then at night she had nightmares. But this is how they were working. When they took in a village, then they were cleaning up with the white ones. And so this man said to my uncle, "We cleaned up quite a bit here, all the white officers, and now somebody has told us that there is a white officer's wife with the children is hiding here in Abramsfeld. Tomorrow we will look for her and finish them up, and then we go to the next village." And then my uncle got such a scare. And then he gave him a good supper, and for the whole bunch, and were nice to them. And then he took him aside, and then he said to him, "You know that officer's wife, that's my brother's wife. Would you spare them, please?" "Okay," he says, "you gave us such nice supper, we'll spare them." And so the Lord helped again. And then time went on, and nobody knew where our daddy was. And Mom was still in bed. I had to do the cooking and baking and washing and looking after the baby. And my sister helped looking after the baby because I had to cook and wash. And one time I made some hamburgers. And we had a stove just from one side. It was a little hole with a little hole where you could cook a plate. And from the other side you put the straw in. And my brother Henry was putting the straw in, and he put so much in that it was so very hot, and I had a whole pan full of hamburgers. All of a sudden, the whole pan started to burn, all full of flames. And then I didn't know what to do. I took the pan and turned it upside down. So all my hamburgers went down into the fire, but the fire was out. And so this is how the Lord helped us. And then in March, all of a sudden our children were playing outside. I heard them cry, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And I ran outside, and sure enough, there was our daddy. And my mother could hear that they were screaming, "Daddy, Daddy." And she couldn't walk all this time. And she got out from the bed and fell, because she couldn't walk. And then when we came in, she was lying there. And then the life was different. Then our daddy went to Millerova again and bought a house. There was even 7 houses. It was like one complex. And it was very cheap to buy, or I don't know how. But he bought the whole complex. There was one house where there was a photographer in. It was all like a photographer. And one house where apotheke, I always can't get the pharmacy, was in. And that was the biggest house. So we took that house for us to live in, and the other houses Dad rented out. And so we moved into this big house, and we were so happy there. And so then this was in March, and then all summer we were then in this house, and then we started to go to school again in fall. And so I went there to high school, and then in 1924 my parents were baptized. We started to go to this Mennonite Brethren church in Millerova and had wonderful times. I started to go there to Sunday school. We all children went to Sunday school, and this is where I heard. Now I was already then I heard from the Russian Baptists, and I knew, and my parents were different too now, and so this is how we heard the real word of God. Yeah, I mean the real, and this is where I was. Then converted, and I went to the Russian school because there was no other high school, just the Russian. And I was the only only German girl in a room in grades, in the last grade. And when I was 16, I was baptized, and I could see from the other side that the river was about 3 miles away from Millerova. So the whole church had to go there. The choir and everybody went there 3 miles. The most of them, they went with horse and buggies. But about 3 weeks before, they had a very big baptism. There were 19 people were baptized, young people. And I wanted to get baptized too. But I had 2 girlfriends. They were twins. And they were a pastor's children. And I wanted them to get baptized too, because we were so close. And I wanted them to come too. No, they didn't want to get baptized. And I wanted so badly. So I didn't go. I thought, no, I'll wait for them. And then when these 19 were baptized, I sang in the choir already because I was converted. And those 2 girls sang in the choir, and we enjoyed it very much. And then when we came back from the baptism, we had the communion in church, and the choir sang. And then they always would say, all the ones what are in the right, right with the Lord, and the ones what belong to the church, get up for taking the bread and taking the wine, yeah? And we three girls were sitting there in the choir. All the rest would get up and take communion, and we three girls sat there. And then all of a sudden it felt like as if Jesus was coming into the back door there, and he looked at me. You know, this is what the feeling I had. And then I was sitting there. I wasn't ready. I wasn't obedient enough to do this for him. I waited for my girlfriend. And then I thought, Jesus, I want to do it now. And as soon as the service was over, I went to the pastor and I said to him, I want to get baptized too. Oh, he said, that's wonderful. He says, I'm going to tell this to the church, and if somebody else wants to come too, we'll give you 3 weeks. We'll give everybody 3 weeks. Whoever wants to come, they can come and come to me and let me know. And the 3 weeks went over and nobody came. So I was all by myself. So the whole church and the choir and everybody had to go in horse and buggies out 3 miles, and there I was baptized. Oh, it was so wonderful to be obedient. And I could see on the other side of the river, it was a little higher, there were sitting some students from our school, all communists. And then when I came to school in fall, this was in July when I got baptized, when I came to school in September, they started to tease me. And if I didn't drown almost, and all heckling, and behind me was a girl. She was a real communist girl. She always tried to heckle. And then we had a teacher, a new teacher for history. And we took Johann Hus. You know about him? I told you about him. And he was one of the martyrs. They put him on a pole and burned him. Johann Hus. And he was a martyr. He was a believer. And we had to take that too. That was history. And then this girl behind me, she says, and this new teacher didn't know us. It's the first time he was with our class. And then she said, oh, we have a student among us who believes like Johann Hus. Oh, he says, it's interesting. And then he asked to stand. And so I got up, and then he said, would you like to come to the front and tell us what Christianity has common, or is the same with communism? And then I was so young yet. I wished I could tell more. But then I said, Jesus was teaching, love your neighbor as yourself, and to be everybody the same. And so does the communists. They teach, or they call each other comrades, yeah? And they want everybody to be the same, but without love. And this is the big difference. And then some started to laugh. And he asked all kinds of questions. I don't remember the rest. But then he said, when they started to laugh, he said, we have to honor each one's conviction, not to laugh at it. I think he wasn't a real communist himself. And so the year went on, and then I was 17, and in August, or the other year, then in April, it started to be again a little bit, it wasn't quite, the communists hadn't established themselves too well, and it was boiling again. And so our parents thought it would be a good idea if we move away, because some people knew my dad before, and so we moved to Kuban. It's maybe 300 or 400 miles south from Millerova. And then we came there, so I had finished really. We had, I was in my last grade already. And then I was 17, and we came to Kuban. It was in April. And then there was a course on for kindergarten teachers. And they had 3 kindergartens. This was a big place, Kuban. There were 3 big streets, and each street about 3 miles long. And it had the close to the river Kuban, and then there was a little hill, and on top of that hill was a short street that was the post street. It was the post office. And then from that was another long street that was the upper Kuban, or the upper street. And that was 3 miles long too. And all German people, most of them. And so this is where we moved. And then this kindergarten course started. And they needed, for the upper one and for the down here, they needed 3 kindergarten teachers. And for in between, it was a shorter street, just 2 teachers. So altogether 8 teachers. And there were 8 girls enrolled to take this course. And so I was the 9th. I asked if it had started already for a week or so. So I asked if I could take a course too. Just if I don't even get a job, I didn't mind, just to take the course. And they said, yes, it's okay. So I took the course. And after we finished, the girls took their positions up in the upper Kuban and down and all over. And I was at home. It was summertime. And then all of a sudden, the inspector from these 3, there was one, that was our Fiddle Friesen in Yarrow, the one that made the violins, his older brother. He was a teacher, and he was the inspector of all the schools, of all 3 kindergartens. And he came to our place, and he said to me, would you mind to take over the kindergarten, the one what is in the middle there? And I said, don't you have enough teachers? Yes, he says, we have enough. But there's one of the teachers in this group who can't sing. She can't keep any melody, and she can't sing. And with the kindergarten, the children don't know notes. There you have to sing. You have to sing every word to them, and every note, so they learn it, yeah? And he says, it just doesn't work. And I knew her very well. She was a little bit like my friend. And I didn't like it, but he says, we talked it over with her, and she doesn't mind. So then I started to teach kindergarten in this group. And there was another girl who had taken the course too. She was a little younger than I. So he wanted me to take over like the principal, for the school. I said, I never had kindergarten before. And I don't know, you learn, he said. And then a week or 2 after came a lady from Moscow. And she was a communist. So our government, they wanted to put communists in these schools. It was too good, too religious maybe. And so they wanted somebody to look over. And they wanted her to be the principal or whatever. And then Mr. Friesen came to me, he says, all the parents don't want her to be the principal. You're supposed to. I was 17. I said, no, I can't. And she was a married lady. But he says, you have to do it. So, and I did it. And then, but she looked so much, or listened to whatever we said. And there was that little song, I want immer will ich Gutes üben, dass mich Gott und Menschen lieben. I want to be good, so God and all the people will love me. And we couldn't say that word God, because we said all the people love me. And so she watched so much what we did. And then we had for 3 months the kindergarten, and it went all well. About maybe 2 or 3 weeks before kindergarten was over, she had the oldest class. They had the middle ones, and another ones, they had the little ones. And we practiced for our, when the summer was over, to have a program. And we practiced and sang songs and had always kind of like Little Red Riding Hood and the 7 goats and all kinds of little birdie and made all in motions. And it was so much fun. And then about 2 or 3 weeks before the end, all of a sudden my Moscow teacher was gone. And I was so young, she had always such a big dress on, and never suspected anything. I didn't look for that, I guess. And then Mr. Friesen came, and he said, she won't be coming back. So you have to take over her class and make the whole program. And I say, how come? And she had a baby. And so she never came back. I don't know, I never have seen her afterwards. And then we had, and these children, what we have here, how much is there left? These children, what we had here, many of them were workers' children. There was, on this short street, that was like the industrial street, there was a big factory, and there were factory workers, and they lived outside there, and mostly factory workers. And these children were from poorer people. And then when we had our Schluss program, there came people from the Armavir, that was our city, the one with, for our Christ. Oh, yeah, I wish I could speak English. For our settlement, not for the settlement, but for the whole place there, all around. And they sent out big government people to be on this program, to see what these children, if they were given something, how they can play and sing and bring all kinds, even the poor people's children. And then we had our program, and it went really well. And they were so taken. They said this was just something wonderful, what we had done with all these children, the program. And then afterwards, and one of our Mennonite ladies, a Christian, an older lady, she came to me and she said, Olga, you get so much praise now. Don't get proud. No, I say no. And then these government men came and asked me if I would be willing to go to Moscow to study their kindergarten and open a kindergarten here in Kuban, where the children would be, especially the workers' children, would stay all day long and be the head of it. And wanted me to go there. But that meant I had to tell the children there is no God and all that. No, I say I can't do it. And then they asked, and later on they wrote again, I could have everything free in Moscow, board and room and everything, just to study, and then to have one here. And I said no, and no, and no. And so then we had, in the winter time, I took some courses in sewing and piano and other courses. What was it? Yes, it was sewing and embroidering. And then the next summer, I guess the kindergarten started again for 3 months. And for the second year, our neighbor was Mr. Evert. His daughters, they are living here. They still call me Tante Olle. They lived across the street from me. And we moved. We were down in that Kuban. It was close to the Kuban River. And my dad bought them. We were living in rent, some years. And then we bought a house on this street, on this short street, because Grandpa started to work for this factory where they made machines in the office. And it was close by. So we bought a house, and so it was close for me to the kindergarten too. So I started, and the first year, because there were so many of these poor children, the richer ones, what had the factory and richer people, they didn't send their children. But then, when we moved there and I came over to the Everts, then their grandpa said, "Oh, this is the very gifted teacher, kindergarten teacher." And I didn't know what to say. I said, "I don't know." But the next year, all these high society people too. So we had the first year close to 40 children. The next year we had over 120. So we had to get some more help. Some more children, bigger girls came to help. And we had a wonderful kindergarten. And then for this, when we had our fest, the last one, my cousin came from Rostov, close to Rostov. There was a German settlement, and the name was Orgenfeld. And many of those people were our relatives. And he came to visit us. He was my cousin. And then he was a teacher. And he was looking for somebody who could speak both languages, German and Russian, and teach in their school. They had an 8th grade school in their settlement, and they needed a teacher for grade 1 and 2. They had them together. No, not together, grade 1, but there were some slow ones and some better ones. And then he came and begged me, "Come and teach school in our place here, because we need a German teacher." Now I said, "I don't have a teacher's certificate, really." And he said, "You have enough practice if you have 2 summers already." And he saw this, our end program. You know, he was there too, not the first time, but the second summer. And he saw it all, what we did with the children. He said, "You know enough. And you know both languages, and that's what we need." And I was then 18 already, coming 19. And then he said, "Can you come?" So I talked it over with my parents, and I had to go with the train quite a ways, maybe 300 miles. And so my mother came along a week before school started, because she hadn't seen all these relatives for a long time. And then she came along, and now she was a Christian, and these were all Lutherans, yeah, and they heard about us. You know, they knew that we were different now, that we had taken a different faith or whatever. And then my mother and I, we were invited all over the place to our relatives, and most of them were well-to-do, and they had pianos. And my mother was a real preacher. She should have been a man and a preacher. And then they would have the whole room full of people, and she would sit there and preach, and then I would play piano, and then we sing together the Christian evangelical songs. And she had a very nice alto voice, and so we sang together. I sang soprano, and so we were all that week before we went the school started. We went from one house to the other. We were invited and preached and sang. And then she went back home, and one of my dad's cousin, she was an elderly lady already, they took me in to stay with them, for board and room. And so I stayed there. And then it went all well. And then after Christmas, I went home. For Christmas, I went home. And just before Christmas, my father's cousin, she was maybe in her 80s already, she died. And she had some grandchildren who were my children in school. And so I thought they were going to bury her in the Lutheran church. And I thought, we have to sing for her. So I gathered those little ones, the grandchildren, and some others too, and sang with them some Jesus Loves Me, little songs. And then we went to church on the funeral and sang with the children. And then I got something from the school board, or from the principal. We as teachers are the one what have to enlighten the people that there isn't any God, and there isn't such a thing, and this is just poison the people, and you are bringing that poison to the children, and doing this. It was a terrible crime. So I said, do you want me to quit? No, we need you here. I say, and then they wanted me to teach evening classes to the grown-ups, young people who couldn't write or read, and especially to tell them anti-religion, against God. I said, I won't do that. Okay, then because they need a teacher. All right, but don't you do it anymore. Yeah. So for Christmas I went home, and they had one of the teachers was a lady, a real communist, and she was an alcoholic, and terrible. So while I was gone for Christmas, a New Year's party or wherever, she went to the bar and drank herself so bad, she was so drunk, the man had to almost carry or schlep her home. It was just, and the people were upset. We don't want such a teacher here. And exactly over Christmas time, there was in the next neighbor settlement, a teacher died, and it was just a small room. I mean, two teachers were just a small school, and so they wanted now. Some of the communists wanted me to go there to help out. But then all the parents came together and said, I wasn't there yet, I was still at home, and said, if you take her away and leave that lady here, we won't send our children to school. We want that lady out from here. So they couldn't do much, because the parents were so upset with it. So she had to go. I didn't know all about it. When I came there, then they told me. And so I stayed there till the end of the school year. And then I came home. And maybe this is already on that Leningrad. Then I came home, and they still wrote me letters if I would come back in September. And I said no. And then this dentist lady that used to live with us in Millerova, in that big house where it was the pharmacy in front, she took that room as an office, and so we know now she moved to Kuban because she wanted to be close to us. And then she told me, Olga, and she was a Russian believer, and she said, if you have to fight so much for your fate or in schools, and it was getting worse and worse. Why don't you study dentistry, dentist technician? And this is what I did. And this is that was the last time we talked about. Now we have connections. And that's all. And I went then to Leningrad and studied. When I came back at Christmas time from home, then this lady had died, and there was another family. We had 2 little girls, and they were relatives of ours too, and they wanted me to stay with them. And so I was supposed to give them piano lessons to these two little girls, and then I didn't have to pay room and board. And they had a Russian girl who was a Christian, and she heard us sing with grandma, with my mother, and then she said, if I wouldn't mind if we could get the Russian from the neighbor settlement. There were Russian settlement. There were quite a few Christians, Baptists. If I wouldn't mind to get the young people here and sing with them, because they don't know many songs. They wanted me to practice with them songs, Russian songs. And so we asked Our Lady where I lived, and she says, of course you can invite them. So they came, and we had the window open, and I sat at the piano and played, and we sang. And they learned Russian Christian songs. And across the street was the government building, where all the our people, I mean the dignitaries from, and they heard that singing. And then our principal came and told me off again. That, Miss Hepting, you can't do that. And then we did it this way. Then this girl, she was their maid, like where I lived. So I sang with her quietly. We had the windows closed, and she learned all the songs. And then she would go to the Russian settlement and sing with the young people. So they got it anyway. Mm-hmm. And this is how the Lord started. Mm-hmm. So that was wonderful. Yeah? Was it on?